So I got a little mini PC here, and I mean, it can do compute work, but it's not terribly useful without some extra hardware. Maybe it's like a desktop some users working on, so they need a keyboard and a mouse. I got flash drives, so we can transfer some files. I care about security now, so I got a hardware security token, a YubiKey in this case. Maybe like a license dongle for some licensed software. Let's plug that guy in too. So now I got a whole bunch of stuff connected over USB, and that's going to interfere with my ability to virtualize this setup. You guys know I like to virtualize all the things. I'm on a quest to eventually replace essentially all of the computers that aren't for lab use with a server rack somewhere in the closet that can run my whole business, everything. And that requires being able to plug real hardware, like these dongles in, to my virtual servers. So I need a solution for that. And so I'm taking a look today at the Digi AnywhereUSB. This is their 8-port model with 10 gig SFP Plus. This is basically an enterprise-friendly way for connecting a bunch of USB 3 devices to infrastructure somewhere else. That could be a real physical desktop. They're just separated far away. It could be some sort of industrial case where you got to put this in some machine somewhere to access it. Or, like I'm looking at today, it could be a virtual machine. So if I were to virtualize this system here, I could move all my real hardware over to this Digibox and then give it access to these real USB ports over the network through this guy here. So I went out looking for products that could extend USB. I've made videos before on HDMI, DisplayPort video stuff, but USB peripherals are a bit harder. And I know there's some solutions for sending USB long distances over fiber. This is what I came up with. It's the Digi AnywhereUSB. Digi was kind enough to sponsor this video to take a look at it. So if this sounds like something you'd be interested in for your Proxmox-based virtualization setup, or any virtualization setup in general, then come along on this adventure. So taking a look at the hardware real quick, this guy's got 8 USB 3.0 ports. They also got screws here for a retention mechanism. If you have that particular need, you can screw them in. We've got Ethernet here. These are one or the other, so you can use gigabit RJ45 or 10 gig SFP Plus. It will automatically fall back to this one if this one loses link, but they're exclusive. Serial console for configuration and some LEDs. On the back, they've got some options here. You can buy it with Wi-Fi or cellular if you need it to dial out or do real long distance stuff, which I'm not doing today. And of course, we need some power. Okay, so I got the guy here on my table running. I decided to connect him over 10 gig fiber back to my switch in the closet. So this means I can test at 10 gigabits for stuff that's USB 3 that really needs the bandwidth. USB 2 is only 480 megabits half duplex, so gigabit would be fine for that, but I got a webcam I want to test, so we're going to need some high speed here. Before I get into installing the client software though, let's take a look at what the web UI looks like. So I'm going to have to flip this guy over to find his model number. So here it has a serial number AW08006013. So over here we're going to go to HTTPS and then that serial number AW0800 blah blah local. And when you log in, username is admin. Password again is written on here, so I got to type that in. XDK92BSFA. So if you need to do any detailed config, you can. This has pretty much all the usual enterprise features. They have cellular modem options, IPv4, IPv6, both fully supported. I'm actually connected over IPv6 right now. You can add it to a specific VLAN tag. You can have it VPN out if you need to connect it to some cloud service that you run, for example. Various forms of user authentication for the device itself. And I'm going to use basically none of that today. Now on my network, the defaults were fine with me. It accepted router advertisements and auto-configured IPv6. I discovered it over multicast DNS, which is fantastic if you're running a network that is not heavily segmented. If you're in a more enterprise scenario with a segmented network, you'd have to discover it or set a static IP or something. Maybe you could just set it up on your bench, plug it into your laptop, configure the IP, and then move it. Whatever you want to do, but I'm happy with the IP address I got. So now let's go ahead and set up the client. And our client today is basic Ubuntu Linux. This is just 2510, and we're just going to try to get it to do some USB stuff. So I got the manager download, just going to go ahead and click Linux, and let's download that guy. It's a tar file. Of course, we need to untar the tar file. And they have given us a number of different packages here. So we have RPMs for Red Hat based, and we have Debs for Debian based. We have 3 options, AMD 64, i386, and AMD 64 headless, and then for both RPM and Deb. And we're going to use this guy today. Go ahead and install that guy. So the main use case that I found when I was going out looking for a device like this was for virtual desktops. So you guys know I've been trying to do like the whole server in the rack runs my whole house thing, servers in the rack, I guess. So for me, having a desktop computer on my desk where I can interact with it's very nice. But I've been struggling to find a good way to run USB 3 long distances. And so I thought this might be a good way to do that. So that's why I'm trying it now with desktop. Now I expect most of you guys are probably going to be using this more with servers, where you've got like, this is a hardware random number generator, which I think is pretty cool. Got a hardware security module, stuff like this that you're going to be using with virtual machines. So I'll get to the headless setup a little bit later in the video, but I'm just showing you guys with the GUI because it's easier to explain first. So now that came back up, we can run AnywhereUSB Manager to launch the manager. First time setup, it's going to generate a certificate, so we'll call this guy USB test. And it found him, but we're not authorized, so we've got to authorize him now. So we're here in the web UI, go into AnywhereUSB Manager, and let's add our client. And we'll give him access to, which groups do we want to give him? So the way groups work is you assign each port to a group, so I can number them 1 through 8. And I could say every port has its own group. I could say 1 and 2 are a group, 3 and 4 are a group, 5 and 6 are a group, 7 and 8 are a group. However, I have my hardware hooked up. I'm going to say 1 port per group. And we'll give him access to 1 to 4. 1 to 4. So I came over here and hit refresh, and we connected. So now I have access to groups 1 to 4, so if I go here and let's connect that group. Now it says in use by me. There's nothing currently showing up on USB. I got a flash drive though, we're going to plug our flash drive in. I'm connected to port 1, so let's plug it into port 1. And there we go, USB 2 flash drive. I'm pretty sure he is SDB, the 8 gig drive. So USB 2 is pretty easy, but let's try some USB 3. So I got a webcam here, I got a USB Type-C cable, because this guy is still USB Type-A. Stick that guy down, and we'll plug into port, what are we on now? Port 2. So let's add group 2 now. Does group 2 show anything? Let's go ahead. So now my webcam shows up under USB 3. And there we go. I can move the camera around. You guys can see me. Not the most responsive, but the chain here is kind of long. So what I mean by the chain is, so I got the camera here. It's sending video over USB 3 through the Anywhere USB over 10 gigabit into the closet where I have a virtual machine running. That is Ubuntu. That is running OBS in the virtual machine. And then I'm viewing the screen of the virtual machine over an emulated VGA card on my laptop over Wi-Fi. So we have a whole bunch of video conversions going on in here, and it's not just the Anywhere USB that's involved in this chain. But it seems to be working fine. So there you can see the camera that I use to record and how absolutely full my room is. Now, I will point out that with 8 ports on this thing, you will totally saturate this if you try to use all high-speed devices like this camera. So I'm not sure what the bandwidth of this camera is, but USB 3.0, which is what the Anywhere USB supports, can do up to 5 gigabits in each direction. 10 gigabit Ethernet can do 10 gigabits in each direction. So already we have a 4-to-1 oversubscription ratio on these ports to the network. Now, for most people, that's probably fine because very few USB 3.0 devices are actually running 5 gigabits continuously. Even like my memory card here, if I had a USB 3 one, I'm not going to be hammering it all day. And if some of your devices are like super low speed stuff like this, they're obviously not going to be doing 10 gigabits over a YubiKey. So be aware of that though when you're sizing your system. So like using a webcam remotely through a GUI is nice and all, but a lot of virtual machines don't have a GUI. I'm going to hesitate to say most don't have a GUI. And a lot of the USB hardware you want to pass through is something that's like a physical, like a license key or a hardware security dongle or something that has to exist in the physical world, and you have to bridge that to the virtual space. So let's do the same setup, but this time we're going to be in a headless virtual machine. We're just interacting with it over SSH. So this time I called it USB deb, and let's again start by downloading the package. So here we go. We got the files again. This time we're going to use the headless version and AMD64.deb. So we'll just copy that guy. However, I'm up against our first issue here. Failed to start USB Manager service. So it did install a service for us, and it didn't work. So it turns out this error is because I'm running a cloud kernel. So the AnywhereUSB software needs a Linux kernel module to emulate USB in the USB device tree in Linux. And it uses a module that's already part of the kernel for this, that's designed for user space to emulate USB. Very normal stuff, except the stripped down cloud kernel packaged by Debian, Ubuntu, and others doesn't include this module because they remove a lot of the modules that deal with so-called like real hardware because they're not necessary in a cloud environment. So we need to bring back that module, and I found the easiest way to do this was to switch to the mainline kernel instead of the cloud kernel. So I'm going to list what I have installed already and search for Linux image because that's the Debian package name for the kernel. So it looks like we're currently running Linux image 6.12.63 deb13 cloud, and we already previously installed kernel 41, or minor 41, but the meta package for that is called Linux Image Cloud AMD64. So we need the version that doesn't have cloud in it, just plain Linux Image AMD64. Then going to remove the old one, and both of them, and run update grub, and reboot. So one reboot later, my Debian virtual machine should have a Debian standard Linux kernel instead of a cloud kernel, and that should have the kernel module that this guy needs to work. So now that I'm on the not cloud kernel, the service started and it's happy. Now to interact with it, we use this tool called AWUSB Manager Headless. And I'm going to tell it to set its client ID, and then it should generate a certificate, and I can add that to hardware. So you guys remember this page, we're going to add USB deb. So I guess the next step is to just ask it for help. And I can actually ask it for help examples too. So let's try listing. So we found my hub, and I have 8 groups. I'm going to try group 8 this time. So let's auto connect to group 8. This time I'm going to test with a YubiKey here. We're going into port 8. And looks like there we go. We are on bus 2, device 2. So does this persist across reboots? Let's find out. Looks like that's a yes. We reconnected automatically. So how many of these guys can I do? So I got a thread radio, got a infinite noise random number generator, a flash drive. I guess a lot of cool stuff to plug in, but let's mount them all and see. Group 7, Group 6, Group 5, and YubiKey, Nordic, Future Devices, FTDI Bridge, and flash drive. Yup. So now you're probably asking, why didn't I do this on the hypervisor? Why did I go into the virtual machine, change the kernel, do all that stuff? And the reason I chose to do it that way is because of migration. If I have the virtual machine running on a hypervisor and I move it to a different node in the cluster, whether it's because I'm doing maintenance on that hypervisor or something like that, I need to retain this USB access. So if the virtual machine is doing its own USB Ethernet to the Anywhere USB, then the hypervisor doesn't care. The network just has to make sure that VM can access whatever network this is on. And that's a relatively straightforward question most of the time. But sometimes you have devices like customer VMs or things like that that aren't part of your network. And so how can I provide the same USB access through Proxmox, the hypervisor? Proxmox is, of course, my hypervisor of choice. Since it's Linux-based, I can just install the headless version on there, and let's see what that looks like. Oh yeah, by the way, if you're on a different subnet and local discovery doesn't work, you can do known hub add, and then the IP address. So it's connected now by IP address, assuming the network allows that connection. Okay, so since Proxmox is based on Debian, Proxmox allows us this level of flexibility to install the software on the hypervisor. Not every hypervisor allows that. So normally to add a USB device, I go here and I say USB device. So my options here are map device, but I haven't set that up. I could set a specific device, so I've got 2 things plugged in now. Or I could choose a USB port. So the YubiKey is on 5.1, so let's try that. So now what I want to know is if I unplug the YubiKey, what is on 5.1? What if I move the YubiKey to port 6? How does that work? I guess we'll plug this into port 1. Okay, so 5.1 has stayed with the YubiKey and not with the specific port. So the infinite noise TRNG is now on the port the YubiKey was on, and the YubiKey has retained its 5.1 even though it moved to a different port. Okay, so I'm hitting a different issue, and that is the virtual machine doesn't support USB at all. Remember how I said that the cloud didn't include that driver we needed in the last step? Turns out it doesn't include USB whatsoever. So I guess we're going to have to try a different virtual machine this time. Okay, let's give you the YubiKey. Okay, so with regular Ubuntu, we can find the YubiKey. It has the USB drivers, and it looks like it's ready to go. So that's what I got for you today on setting up and using the Digi AnywhereUSB. So I guess I'll start with grounding this sort of follow-up with the price. So this guy is billing itself as an enterprise product, and it has an enterprise price to match. So the 8-port model I have in my hand today, the list price on DigiKey is $1,800. I'm sure that varies a bit where you get it from. And with that, they're offering a ton of enterprise class features into this device. The ability to VPN out, they have a checkbox for FIPS compliance, they have all kinds of stuff like that that enterprise deployments would probably really like. The IPv6 support is excellent. I was happy with that. They can do all kinds of different user authentication methods, LDAP, Radius, TACACS. So the stuff you'd expect from an enterprise class product. Whether or not you need that in your deployment, I guess, is up to you. Now, as to where I would use one of these, so I think I've mentioned before on the channel, I started my IT career in what IT people call shadow IT, and probably hate. So that basically means doing networking or information type work behind IT's back. So I worked in a lot of different departments, but I worked in one called Test Methods for a while. And they develop electronic test equipment to test other electronics mostly. So I was highly knowledgeable in the electronics I was testing. I would have to build whole racks of equipment that could stimulate 300 plus wires on something being tested, measure them all. Some of the signals had to have crazy high accuracy tolerances. And we would be pulling in all kinds of different weird Ethernet, ISA, PCI, USB devices from around the world to emulate all of these signals we're trying to talk. Now that was 10 years ago, and it was already out of date back then. So if I was deploying something in that line of work today, I would want to be virtualizing everything that I could. Everything about the whole OT life. You have a lot of weird hardware that has a very long lifespan that might have very old interfaces or an interface that was popular 15 years ago or something. And if I could get all that software running on a virtual machine, that means now I can snapshot it. I have disaster recovery through the hypervisor, through the backup system, much more easily than with some PC running Windows XP running old software in the closet. And that often means interfacing with old hardware, some of which might use USB, and where a box like this would really help bringing that into the modern world and bringing that into the virtual machine. So I am very glad this device exists. I do wish I could find a cheaper version that's less enterprise-centric and enterprise-priced, but this is what I got for you guys today. It does work very well. I have not had any issues with it, and I've been super happy with the quality of the UI, the software. They're not using any proprietary kernel modules on Linux. I don't know about Windows, but I didn't test Windows. I'm a Linux guy. So that's good at least. It has a ton of features if you need them. I didn't find myself needing all of them, so I tested the sort of basics today, but thanks for coming. If you want to chat with me more, I have a Discord server link down below for that. I'll also have links to the product page for this and other stuff from Digi. Thanks to Digi for sponsoring this look at it. I'm very glad to work with them. I also sell shirts now. If you want a t-shirt like this, use Bcachefs, the cow file system that won't eat your data. I sell them, link down below to my Ko-fi for that. You can all follow me on Mastodon, and I guess I'll see you guys on the next adventure.